The massive Valaxian ship shuddered as another system failed. Red emergency lights flashed across the bridge. Fleet Admiral Zekthora's antennae twitched with worry as she studied the damage reports flowing in from all 300 vessels under her command. Main engines are offline across 60% of the fleet, reported her second-in-command. We cannot continue our journey. Zekthora clicked her mandibles in frustration. They had traveled so far already, carrying the last 5 million survivors of their dying world. Now stranded in an unknown sector of space, their options were few. "We must send a distress signal," she finally said. The bridge crew fell silent. In their centuries of space travel, the Valaxians had encountered far more hostile species than friendly ones. A distress signal might bring help, or doom. "The nearest detected civilization is primitive," said Communication Officer Tikval. "They have only recently achieved spaceflight. They call their planet Earth." "Send the signal anyway," ordered Zekthora. "We have no choice." Across the vast emptiness of space, the Valaxian distress call traveled for 3 days before reaching Earth. At the International Space Agency headquarters in Geneva, alarms blared as the signal was detected. Dr. Olivia Martinez was jolted awake at her desk, surrounded by linguistics reference materials and empty coffee cups. "We've got something," said her assistant, rushing into the room. "Something big." Dr. Martinez hurried to the main communication center where dozens of scientists had gathered. On the main screen, strange symbols pulsed in patterns unlike anything humans had seen before. "Is it really alien?" she whispered, her heart racing. The ISA director, Gregory Campbell, nodded grimly. "All signs point to a non-human origin. We need you to decode it, Olivia. Fast." For the next 72 hours, Dr. Martinez barely left her workstation. She analyzed patterns, compared frequencies, and built translation algorithms. Sleep came in short bursts, usually face down on her keyboard. When the breakthrough finally came, it was 3:27 a.m. "It's a distress call," she announced to the emergency committee. "A refugee fleet with millions of lives aboard. Their engines have failed. They're stranded." The committee room erupted in debate. Some argued for caution. This could be a trap. Others insisted on humanity's moral obligation to help. Captain Daniel Wright listened quietly from the back of the room. At 42, he had led more rescue missions than anyone else in the ISA. His weathered face remained calm while others shouted around him. Director Campbell finally noticed him. "Captain Wright, you've been quiet. What's your take?" The room fell silent as Wright stood. "In my experience, sir, when someone calls for help, you go. We can take precautions, but we go." 3 days later, Captain Wright stood in the hangar of the ISS Horizon, watching his volunteer crew make final preparations. The sleek rescue vessel wasn't designed for first contact with alien civilizations, but it was the fastest ship Earth had. Lieutenant Alan Fisher, the ship's chief engineer, approached with a tablet. "Engine modifications are complete, Captain. We've squeezed another 12% from the thrust capacity." "Good work," said Wright. "We'll need every bit of speed we can get." Dr. Susan Miller joined them, carrying cases of medical supplies. As the mission's xenobiologist, she had prepared for every possible alien biology she could imagine. "I still can't believe we're really doing this," she said. "First contact, and it's a rescue mission." Wright nodded. "Makes you proud to be human, doesn't it?" First Officer Lisa Brown interrupted their conversation. "Final checks complete, Captain. All systems are green." Wright looked at his small but determined crew. They were about to attempt something unprecedented in human history, saving an alien species. "Let's make history," he said simply. "Launch in 30 minutes." As the ISS Horizon and 2 smaller support vessels lifted off from Earth, millions watched the live stream. News anchors called it humanity's greatest adventure. Religious leaders debated the theological implications. Military strategists worried about potential threats. But aboard the Horizon, Captain Wright had simpler concerns. There were lives to save, even if those lives had exoskeletons and came from a distant star. The mission had begun. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Fleet Admiral Zek Thora watched her fleet's life support readings slowly decline. She wondered if anyone had heard their call, or if the last of the Valaxian people would perish here, alone in the cold emptiness of space. The IS horizon pushed through the darkness of space at speeds no human vessel had ever achieved. Inside, the skeleton crew of 30 volunteers worked around the clock in rotating shifts. They were 2 weeks into their journey, with another 2 weeks to go before reaching the stranded alien fleet. Captain Daniel Wright sat in his quarters, looking at an old photo. It showed a younger version of himself standing next to 5 survivors from a collapsed Antarctic research station. That rescue had made him famous on Earth, but this mission was on an entirely different scale. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. "Captain, we have a problem with the oxygen recyclers," said Lieutenant Alan Fisher. The engineer's face was streaked with grease. "The system wasn't designed for these speeds. The vibrations are causing microfractures." Wright put down the photo. "How bad?" "We can fix it, but I'll need to take the system offline for 6 hours. We'll be on emergency tanks." "Do what you need to do," Wright said. "Just keep us moving." As Fisher left to make repairs, Wright headed to the communications center where Dr. Olivia Martinez was hunched over screens filled with alien symbols. "Any progress?" Wright asked. Martinez looked up, dark circles under her eyes. "Some. I can now understand about 40% of their language. They call themselves the Valaxians." She pulled up an image constructed from the data they had received. It showed an insect-like being with 4 arms, a hard exoskeleton, and large compound eyes. "Their biology is completely different from ours," she continued. "They breathe a mixture of oxygen and nitrogen, but in different proportions than we do. Their ships are failing because something is wrong with their engines, but the technical terms don't translate well." Wright nodded. "Keep working on it. The more we know before we arrive, the better." In the ship's small cafeteria, Dr. Susan Miller ate a quick meal while studying alien biology files. First Officer Lisa Brown joined her, carrying a cup of coffee. "How's the research going?" Brown asked. Miller sighed. "It's fascinating and terrifying at the same time. If their life support systems fail completely, millions will die. Their exoskeletons can withstand vacuum for short periods, but not the extreme cold of space." "Do you think we can really help them?" Brown asked. "We barely understand their technology." "We have to try," Miller replied simply. On the bridge, navigator William Cole plotted their course through an asteroid field. The shorter route would save 3 days of travel time, but carried more risk. "Captain, I recommend we take the asteroid route," he said when Wright returned to the bridge. "The Valaxians' latest message indicates their life support systems are beginning to fail." Wright studied the projected path. "Do it." The next day, as the Horizon navigated through the asteroid field, Lieutenant Fisher worked in the engine room on a new project. He had been studying the Valaxian engine designs from the limited data they had received. "This might actually work," he muttered to himself as he modified Earth technology to be compatible with the alien systems. First Officer Brown found him surrounded by parts and diagrams. "Should you be working on this? We were sent to escort them, not fix their ships." Fisher looked up. "If we can't help them repair their engines, escorting them won't matter. They'll never make it to Earth or anywhere else." Across the ship, Dr. Martinez suddenly shouted in excitement. "I've got it. I've decoded more of their message." Captain Wright rushed to her station. "What is it?" "They're not just dealing with engine failure," Martine said, her face grave. "Their life support is failing faster than they initially reported. And there's something else." She paused, reading the alien text carefully. "They're being pursued by something called the Draconids. It sounds like another alien species, and not a friendly one." Wright's expression hardened. "Send a message back. Tell them we're coming as fast as we can." As the Horizon pushed through space, The crew worked with renewed urgency. What had begun as a rescue mission was becoming more complex and more dangerous with each passing day. Thousands of light years away, Admiral Zek Thora received the humans' message. For the first time since their exodus began, she allowed herself to feel something close to hope. The IS horizon dropped out of maximum speed as they approached the coordinates of the Valaxian fleet. The bridge crew fell silent as the vast collection of alien ships came into view on their screens. "My God," whispered Captain Wright. "There are hundreds of them." The Valaxian vessels were enormous, each one easily 20 times the size of the horizon. Their hulls were shaped like elongated hexagons with raised ridges that glowed faintly blue. Over 300 ships floated in a defensive formation, many showing visible damage. Receiving transmission from what appears to be their command ship, reported Communications Officer Ben Howard. "Put it through," ordered Wright. The main screen filled with the image of Admiral Zek Thora. The bridge crew tried not to stare at her insect-like features. 4 arms moved in precise patterns as she operated controls outside the frame. Her large compound eyes reflected the light from her bridge. "Greetings, humans," Dr. Martinez translated as the alien spoke. "We are surprised that a species at your level of development responded to our distress call." Captain Wright stepped forward. "We came as soon as we received your message. We're here to help in any way we can." Zek Thora's antennae twitched, a gesture Martinez interpreted as skepticism. "Your vessels are primitive," the translation continued. "What assistance could you possibly provide?" "Sometimes fresh eyes see solutions others miss," Wright replied evenly. "We would like permission to come aboard your vessel and assess the situation directly." A long pause followed as Zek Thora conferred with other Valaxians off-screen. "Permission granted," she finally said. "You may bring 3 of your kind aboard. We will transmit docking instructions." After the communication ended, First Officer Brown approached Wright. "Are you sure about this, Captain? We know almost nothing about them." "I'm sure about the millions of lives at stake," Wright answered. "Prepare the shuttle. I want Fisher for his engineering expertise and Dr. Miller for biological assessment." An hour later, Wright, Fisher, and Miller boarded the Valaxian command ship. They wore standard spacesuits modified to match the atmospheric composition Dr. Martinez had calculated from the Valaxian data. They were met at the airlock by 3 Valaxians. The aliens towered over them, standing nearly 8 feet tall on 4 jointed legs. Their chitinous exoskeletons shimmered with iridescent patterns. "I am Tikval," the lead Valaxian said through a translation device. "I will escort you to Admiral Zek Thora." As they walked through the massive ship, the humans stared in wonder. The corridors were wide and tall with hexagonal patterns repeated throughout the architecture. Other Valaxians stopped to watch them pass, clicking their mandibles in what seemed like surprise or curiosity. "How many Valaxians are aboard this fleet?" asked Dr. Miller. 5,273,412. Tikval replied precisely. "All that remains of our species." The humans exchanged solemn glances. The entire population of an intelligent species was traveling in these ships. They reached the bridge, a vast chamber with dozens of Valaxians working at various stations. Admiral Zek Thora stood on a raised platform at the center. "Welcome aboard, humans," she said through her translator. "I am still uncertain how creatures of your limited technological development might assist us, but we have few options remaining." Captain Wright stepped forward. "We'd like to start by understanding exactly what's happening with your engines." Zek Thora gestured to a Valaxian with distinctive green markings on his exoskeleton. "This is Zivlon, our chief engineer," he will explain. Zivlon activated a holographic display showing the complex engine systems. Lieutenant Fisher immediately began asking technical questions that surprised the Valaxians with their insight. As they discussed the engine problems, Dr. Miller noticed something concerning. Several Valaxians on the bridge showed signs of what appeared to be illness. Their movements were sluggish, and their exoskeletons had dull patches. Their discussion was interrupted by an alarm. A Valaxian rushed to Zekthora with urgent news. "What's happening?" asked Captain Wright. Admiral Zekthora's compound eyes seemed to darken. "Our long-range sensors have detected ships approaching." "Draconid ships. Who are the Draconids?" Wright asked. "Our ancient enemy," Zekthora replied. "They have pursued us across 12 star systems, determined to eliminate our species entirely. Now they have found us again." The holographic display shifted to show a fleet of aggressive-looking vessels moving toward their position. "How long until they arrive?" Wright asked. 3 weeks, perhaps less," said Zekthora. "And without functioning engines, we cannot escape." Lieutenant Alan Fisher stared at the massive engine core of the Valaxian command ship. Chief Engineer Zivlon hovered nearby, his 4 arms moving constantly as he explained the complex system through his translator. "The quantum resonance chamber should produce enough energy to power the entire fleet," Zivlon said. "But the output has decreased by 73% over the past month." Fisher walked around the engine, studying it from all angles. Human technology was primitive compared to this, but engineering principles were still engineering principles. "You've replaced all the damaged components?" he asked. "Multiple times," Zivlon replied. "Nothing works for long." Meanwhile, in another section of the ship, Dr. Susan Miller examined several ill Valaxians in their medical bay. The alien doctor, Rekinar, showed her their medical scans. "The illness began 2 months ago," Rekinar explained. "It affects the nervous system first, then spreads to the exoskeleton. We have no effective treatment." Miller frowned. "Is it contagious? How many are affected?" "Nearly 12% of our population shows symptoms," Rekinar said. "The rate of infection increases daily." Back on the bridge, Captain Wright learned more about the Draconid threat from Admiral Zekthora. "Our conflict with the Draconids spans generations," the Admiral explained. "They see all other intelligent species as competition for resources. They do not negotiate or show mercy." "How powerful are their weapons?" Wright asked. Zekthora activated a holographic display showing a Draconid attack on a Valaxian colony. The destruction was absolute. "Their technology exceeds ours," she said simply. "If they reach us before we can escape, we will be destroyed." Wright's face showed determination. "Then we won't let that happen." On Earth, ISA Director Gregory Campbell faced mounting pressure from world governments. The mission had been authorized as a humanitarian effort, but the discovery of a hostile alien force changed everything. "You're telling me our people are caught between 2 alien species that might bring their war to our doorstep?" demanded the UN Security Council representative. "Captain Wright believes the Valaxians pose no threat to Earth," Campbell replied. "Their entire culture is built around cooperation and survival." "And these Draconids?" Campbell hesitated. "They appear to be highly aggressive, but they're still weeks away from reaching our people." After heated debate, the decision was made. Commander Paul Evans was ordered to prepare a second fleet to support the rescue mission, and to defend Earth's interests if necessary. Back on the Valaxian ship, Lieutenant Fisher noticed something odd about the engine components he was examining. Under a microscope, the metal alloy showed tiny imperfections that shouldn't be there. "These aren't random failures," he told Zivlon. "Look at this pattern. It's too consistent." The Valaxian engineer's antennae twitched in confusion. "What are you suggesting?" "I think your engines are being sabotaged," Fisher said. "These microscopic fractures aren't from normal wear. They're artificial." In the medical bay, Dr. Miller made a similar discovery. She compared blood samples from healthy and sick Valaxians under a powerful microscope. "There's something in their bloodstream," she told Dr. Rekinar. "Some kind of synthetic nanoparticle. It's not natural." The 2 discoveries sent shockwaves through the Valaxian leadership. Admiral Zekthora called an emergency meeting with the human team. "If what you found is true, we have a saboteur among us," she said, her voice filled with concern. "Possibly a Draconid agent. The engine damage and the illness might be connected." Captain Wright suggested. Could these nanoparticles be affecting both your people and your technology? Zivlon and Rekinar exchanged glances. It's possible, Zivlon admitted. The same particles could disrupt our biological neural networks and our engine control systems. We need to isolate these particles and find a way to neutralize them, Fisher said. And quickly. Just then, Communications Officer Ben Howard contacted them from the horizon. Captain, we're receiving a message from Earth, he reported. Commander Evans is on his way with 3 ships. He'll arrive in 5 days. That's the first good news we've had, Wright replied. Tell them to bring everything they can from Dr. Nancy Clark's nanotech lab. We're going to need it. As the meeting ended, Dr. Miller noticed Admiral Zek Thora stumble slightly. The illness was starting to affect even the Valaxian leadership. The clock was ticking. They now faced 3 deadly threats: engine failure, spreading illness, and the approaching Draconid fleet. Humanity's rescue mission had become a race against time. The second human fleet arrived with remarkable timing. 3 ships dropped out of high-speed travel and approached the Valaxian fleet. The ISS Defender, slightly larger than the Horizon, led the way. Captain Wright and Admiral Zek Thora watched from the Valaxian command bridge as the human reinforcements docked with the main ship. Your species continues to surprise me, Zek Thora said. Her voice sounded weaker than before, and Wright noticed her movements were slower. The illness was progressing. Commander Paul Evans was the first aboard, followed by Dr. Nancy Clark, Earth's leading expert on nanotechnology. They'd brought crates of specialized equipment with them. Good to see you alive, Dan, Commander Evans said, shaking Wright's hand. At 55, Evans had more gray in his hair than Wright remembered, but his grip was still firm. The situation is worse than we thought, Wright said, leading them to a conference room where Lieutenant Fisher and Dr. Miller waited with their Valaxian counterparts. Dr. Clark wasted no time. She immediately began setting up her equipment while Fisher and Miller briefed her on their findings. These nanobots are unlike anything I've seen, she said, examining the samples. They're programmed to target specific molecular structures in both the Valaxian biology and their engine components. Can you disable them? Admiral Zek Thora asked. Dr. Clark looked uncertain. I'll need time to study them more thoroughly. But yes, I think I can develop a countermeasure. Commander Evans turned to the Admiral. We've also brought supplies and replacement parts that might help with repairs. And weapons, if the Draconids arrive before we're done. Meanwhile, deep in the service tunnels of the Valaxian ship, a small group of Valaxians met in secret. Their leader, Nivtek, had distinctive red markings on his exoskeleton. The humans are interfering with the plan, he told the others. If they develop a countermeasure for the nanobots, the Draconids will hold us responsible. What should we do? Asked one of his followers. We must sabotage their efforts, Nivtek replied. The humans must fail. Back in the main laboratory, Dr. Clark worked alongside Dr. Miller and Valaxian scientists. After 36 hours without sleep, she had a breakthrough. The nanobots respond to a specific frequency, she explained to Captain Wright and Admiral Zek Thora. If we broadcast a counter-signal throughout the fleet, we should be able to deactivate them. How soon can you have it ready? Wright asked. Another 12 hours to perfect the signal, Clark replied. Then we'll need to modify the communication systems on each ship to broadcast it. Lieutenant Fisher and Chief Engineer Zivlon had already started preparing the broadcast equipment when the attack came. An explosion rocked the laboratory section. Emergency alarms blared as smoke filled the corridors. The countermeasure, Dr. Clark shouted, grabbing her data storage device. Captain Wright activated his communicator. Security team to the laboratory section. We have an attack. Valaxian security forces rushed to the scene, led by Security Chief Mazkor. They found 3 Valaxians attempting to destroy the laboratory equipment. A firefight erupted in the narrow corridor. Energy weapons scorched the walls as the security team exchanged fire with the saboteurs. In the chaos, Lieutenant Fisher saw one of the attackers aiming at Dr. Clark as she protected the precious data. Without hesitation, Fisher launched himself forward, pushing her out of the way. The energy blast hit a nearby console, causing a secondary explosion. Zivlon, seeing the danger to his human colleague, moved with surprising speed. The Valaxian engineer shielded Fisher with his own body as debris rained down. When the smoke cleared, the saboteurs had been captured, but the cost was high. Zivlon lay badly injured, his exoskeleton cracked and internal fluids leaking onto the floor. "Get him to the medical bay," Fisher shouted, cradling the injured Valaxian. Dr. Miller and the Valaxian medical team worked desperately to save Zivlon's life. His injuries were severe, but he clung to life. Admiral Zekthora personally interrogated the captured saboteurs. The truth was worse than they had feared. Niv Tech and his followers had made a deal with the Draconids. In exchange for their own survival, they had agreed to sabotage the fleet from within. "Why would you betray your own people?" Zekthora demanded. "The Draconids cannot be defeated," Niv Tech replied coldly. "Cooperation is the only way to survive." Despite the attack, Dr. Clark's countermeasure was safe. As Zivlon fought for his life in the medical bay, the human Valaxian team prepared to deploy their solution. But now they knew. The enemy wasn't just approaching from outside. It was already among them. Zivlon survived the night, though his condition remained critical. Lieutenant Alan Fisher barely left the medical bay, feeling responsible for the Valaxian engineer's sacrifice. "He saved my life," Fisher told Captain Wright when he came to check on them. "That's what allies do," Wright replied, placing a hand on Fisher's shoulder. "Now we need to make sure his sacrifice wasn't in vain." The deployment of Dr. Clark's countermeasure began immediately. Teams of humans and Valaxians installed the broadcasting equipment on each ship in the fleet. As the signal spread, the effects were remarkable. The nanobots deactivated, their sabotage halted. In the medical bay, ill Valaxians began to show signs of improvement within hours. Dr. Miller monitored their recovery alongside the Valaxian medical team. "The nanobots are breaking down," she reported. "The patient's natural healing processes are taking over." With the immediate health crisis addressed, attention returned to the critical engine repairs. The countdown to the Draconid arrival showed just 11 days remaining. Commander Evans called a strategy meeting with Admiral Zekthora and the senior officers from both species. "Even with the nanobots neutralized, the damage to the engines is extensive," Evans said, reviewing the reports. "Can we get them operational in time?" Chief Mechanical Officer Drenval, who had taken over for the injured Zivlon, clicked his mandibles anxiously. "We can restore partial function to the fleet, perhaps 40% of our ships, but not all 300 vessels. That's not enough to outrun the Draconids," Zekthora said. Her own health had begun to improve, but concern clouded her compound eyes. The room fell silent. 5 million lives depended on finding a solution. What about a different route? Navigator William Cole suggested. He pointed to the star charts. "There's a nebula here, about 3 days' journey at the speeds your partially repaired engines could achieve." Drenval studied the charts. "The radiation levels in that nebula would be lethal to us. Our shields cannot withstand that kind of exposure." Lieutenant Fisher, who had joined them from the medical bay, leaned forward. "What if we modify your shields with our technology? Earth's ships use a different shielding approach that might be more effective against radiation. Is that possible?" Admiral Zekthora asked. "Theoretically," Fisher said. "Our shields are weaker overall, but specifically designed to block certain types of radiation. If we combine the two technologies." Commander Evans nodded. "It's worth trying." "What do we need?" "Equipment from all 3 of our ships," Fisher replied, "and every capable engineer working around the clock." As they left the meeting to begin the shield modifications, long-range sensors detected movement. "Captain," Communications Officer Ben Howard called from the horizon. "The Draconid fleet has increased speed. New estimated arrival: 7 days." The news spread quickly through the fleet. Fear gripped the Valaxian population, but the human presence provided a strange comfort. These small, fragile beings from a distant planet continued to work tirelessly on their behalf. The shield modification project proceeded under Fisher's direction. Human and Valaxian engineers worked side by side, overcoming language barriers and technological differences through shared determination. In the medical bay, Zivlon finally regained consciousness. Fisher was there when the Valaxian engineer's eyes flickered open. Did it work? Zivlon asked weakly. The countermeasure. It worked perfectly, Fisher assured him. And we're making progress on the engines and shields. Good, Zivlon said. I did not wish to die for nothing. You're not going to die, Fisher said firmly. I'm going to name my first child after you, so you need to stay alive to meet them someday. The Valaxian made a sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. As the fourth day of preparations ended, Admiral Zekthora summoned Captain Wright to the observation deck. Together they looked out at the massive fleet and the teams of humans and Valaxians working together on the exterior of the ships. When we sent our distress call, Zekthora said quietly, I never imagined help would come from such an unexpected source. That's the thing about the universe, Wright replied. Sometimes help comes from where you least expect it. The Draconids will arrive in 3 days, Zekthora noted. Our engines will be minimally functional. Our path through the nebula is plotted. But the shield modifications will be ready, Wright said with conviction. Fisher and your people won't let us down. As if in answer to his faith, a test shield generator on one of the smaller Valaxian vessels flickered to life. The new hybrid shield glowed with a distinctive blue-green light that gradually stabilized. The Draconids arrived sooner than expected. The massive enemy ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system, their angular, predatory forms instantly recognizable on the long-range scanners. Battle stations. Commander Evans ordered across all human vessels. Defensive formation around the Valaxian fleet. Admiral Zekthora's voice echoed through the communication systems of all 300 Valaxian ships. Prepare for emergency jump. All non-essential systems divert power to engines and shields. The mood throughout the fleet was tense but determined. 2 days of non-stop work had equipped nearly 70% of the Valaxian vessels with the new hybrid shields. The remaining ships would need to cluster close to the protected ones for the journey through the nebula. On the command bridge, Navigator William Cole plotted the final escape route. The nebula is 6 hours away at maximum speed. The Draconids will intercept us before we reach it unless we can slow them down. Captain Wright studied the tactical display. The Draconid fleet was spreading out, preparing to surround them. Their weapon systems were powering up. We need a diversion, Wright said. He turned to Admiral Zekthora. Start moving your fleet toward the nebula. The human ships will buy you time. That is suicide, Zekthora protested. Their weapons will tear your vessels apart. Not if we don't give them a clear target, Wright replied. He activated his communicator. Lieutenant Howard, get me Dr. Martinez. I need to know if she's finished decoding the Draconid communication protocols. Dr. Olivia Martinez had been working furiously to understand the enemy communications intercepted by the Valaxian sensors. Her voice came through, tired but excited. I found a pattern, Captain. They use a multi-frequency encryption system, but there's a vulnerability. If we broadcast on all frequencies simultaneously, we can create interference in their targeting systems. Do it, Wright ordered. Commander Evans, prepare the Horizon and Defender for attack pattern Delta. The 3 human ships broke formation, their engines flaring as they accelerated toward the approaching Draconid fleet. Compared to the massive enemy vessels, the human ships looked like insects attacking a group of predators. Broadcast jamming signal now, Wright commanded. The human ships began emitting the complex interference pattern developed by Dr. Martinez. The effect was immediate. The Draconid vessels' weapon systems faltered, their targeting becoming erratic. Taking advantage of the confusion, the human ships darted between the enemy vessels, forcing the Draconids to hold their fire for fear of hitting their own ships. It's working. First Officer Lisa Brown reported. Their formation is breaking up. Behind them, the Valaxian fleet began to move toward the nebula, their damaged engines straining but functional. The modified shields glowed with an eerie blue-green light as they powered up. The Draconids quickly adapted to the jamming signal, adjusting their communications. Their first volley of energy weapons streaked across space toward the human ships. The ISS Horizon rolled sideways, avoiding the main blast, but catching the edge of the energy field. The ship shuddered violently. Port shield down to 30%. Howard shouted above the alarms. Keep moving. Wright ordered. Don't give them a stationary target. The smaller support vessel took a direct hit, its engines flaring out. Commander Evans on the Defender maneuvered to protect it, taking heavy damage in the process. The Valaxian fleet is halfway to the nebula, Brown reported. They need another 20 minutes. Then we give them 20 minutes, Wright said grimly. The human ships continued their desperate dance among the Draconid vessels, drawing fire and attention away from the escaping Valaxians. Lieutenant Howard used the chaos to send a constant stream of false targeting data to the enemy ships, causing them to fire on incorrect locations. On the Valaxian command ship, Admiral Zekthora watched the battle with a mixture of awe and dread. These humans, with their primitive technology, were willingly sacrificing themselves to save her people. Prepare to activate the hybrid shields, she ordered as they approached the nebula's edge. And continue monitoring the human vessels. We will not leave them behind. Lieutenant Fisher, working with the recovered Zivlon in the engine room, pushed the damaged systems to their limits. The plasma conduits can't take much more, Zivlon warned as the temperature readings climbed into the red zone. They only need to hold until we reach the nebula, Fisher replied, manually rerouting power through backup systems. The edge of the nebula loomed ahead, a swirling mass of colors and lethal radiation. Behind them, the human ships continued their desperate battle against overwhelming odds. The first Valaxian ships entered the nebula, their hybrid shields glowing brightly against the swirling rainbow of deadly radiation. Inside the ships, the refugee population held their breath, watching as the shields held firm against the forces that would normally have killed them within minutes. Hybrid shields functioning at 93% efficiency, reported Chief Mechanical Officer Drenval from the command ship. Radiation levels within acceptable parameters. Admiral Zekthora's antennae twitched with relief, but her attention remained fixed on the battle behind them. The human vessels were taking heavy damage as they continued their desperate delaying action. Bring the fleet to a halt just inside the nebula perimeter, she ordered. We will not leave until all 3 human ships are with us. The ISS Horizon spun through space, trailing debris from multiple hull breaches. Captain Wright gripped his command chair as the ship shuddered under another impact. Main power failing. First Officer Brown reported. Life support down to emergency levels. The Valaxian fleet. Wright asked. All ships have reached the nebula edge, Brown replied. They're holding position. Wright smiled through the pain of a gash on his forehead. Then it worked. Signal the Defender and the support vessel. Fall back to the nebula immediately. The 3 damaged human ships turned and burned their remaining fuel in a desperate run toward safety. The Draconids, realizing their prey was escaping, concentrated all fire on the retreating vessels. The smallest human ship, already severely damaged, took a direct hit to its engine core. The resulting explosion lit up space like a miniature sun. 37 crew members lost in an instant. No, Wright shouted, watching the destruction on his screen. The Defender, under Commander Evans' control, moved to shield the horizon, taking multiple hits in the process. Its hull glowed red from the energy impacts. Evans, break off. Wright ordered over the communication link. Sag your ship. Not without you. Evans' voice crackled through the static. We started this together. We'll finish it together. On the Valaxian command ship, Lieutenant Fisher and Zivlon watched the battle with growing horror. We have to help them, Fisher said. Zivlon hesitated only for a moment before activating the ship's communication system. "Admiral, request permission to take a rescue shuttle with modified shields to assist the human vessels." To Fisher's surprise, Admiral Zekthora was already heading for the launch bay. "Permission granted. I will lead the mission myself." 3 Valaxian rescue vessels, their hybrid shields at maximum power, shot out from the nebula edge. They were smaller and faster than the refugee ships, and they moved with purpose toward the embattled human vessels. The Horizon's engines sputtered and died completely just as the nebula came into view. The ship drifted, powerless and vulnerable. "Prepare for boarding," Wright told his crew. "We may need to evacuate." Through the bridge viewport, Wright watched in amazement as the Valaxian rescue ships surrounded the Horizon and Defender, extending their shields to encompass the human vessels. "This is Admiral Zekthora," came the transmission. "We have you within our shield perimeter. We will tow you to safety." The combined ships moved slowly toward the nebula as the Draconids continued their relentless assault. The hybrid shields flickered under the barrage, but held just long enough for them to cross into the nebula's protective veil. Once inside, the Draconids halted their attack. Their ships were not equipped to withstand the nebula's radiation, and they could not follow. In the medical bay of the Valaxian command ship, Captain Wright regained consciousness after emergency treatment for his injuries. Admiral Zekthora stood beside his bed. "Your people saved mine," she said simply. "So we saved yours. This debt can never be repaid." Wright managed to smile. "That's not how friends work, Admiral. Friends help each other because it's the right thing to do." 3 days later, the combined fleet emerged from the other side of the nebula. The Draconids had not found a way to follow them. During those 3 days, human and Valaxian engineers completely repaired the hybrid shields and significantly improved the Valaxian engines using concepts from Earth technology. Dr. Miller and the Valaxian medical team eliminated the last traces of the nanobots from all patients. As the fleet prepared to set course for Earth, Admiral Zekthora addressed both species through a fleet-wide broadcast. "Today marks the beginning of a new alliance," she said. "The Valaxian people will never forget what humanity did for us when we faced extinction. Together, we will build a future neither of us could have achieved alone."